All right, we have exactly 5 minutes left on Planet Green Juice. We're going to go over a little bit. I think if we need to here, we want to get our good friend from the Human Solutions.
Hello, how are you gentlemen tonight?
Steve Green, how are you? Thanks for hanging in there and not being so patient. I think it was enjoyable listening to Dr. Crocker a little bit. Got a little rant going on the Lara, put them in their place, at least as far as we're concerned. But tell us what's happening with the Human Solutions.
First, I just wanted to say hats off to Dr. Proctor, and he has my full respect. We attended the Lara meeting. There was about 30 people from the public, which ended in standing room only. And out of the 30, there were 8 members with ribbons on from THS also there. With that being said, I won't spend too much time on it, but again, Dr. Proctor and David Bronner really tried to nail some of the things. It appeared some of the doctors didn't know that autism was a spectrum disorder. One of the panelists also didn't even know that it was a recommendation that was how we were recommended medical marijuana. So I just would have liked to have seen, maybe a little prep work more for the people that were able to make votes. With that being said, I'm going to go into the court dates. We have Mr. Corbin on 8/9, which is tomorrow at 2:30 in Isabella County for a Section 8 hearing. We have Rachel Nichols on 8/12 at 11 o'clock a.m. in Shiawassee County for a Section 8. We have Jonathan Deek in Cassopolis for a prelim examination on 8/13 at 10 a.m. We have my wife and myself in Oakland County on 8/14 at 8:30 a.m. She'll be doing a Section 8, and I'll be doing a Section 4 hearing, or motion at least. And then 8/23 in Oakland County at 8:30 a.m. is the Argro case. And I just wanted to touch on 2 other things, and that's, there's a lot of discussion now on seizures, and Dr. Gupta is really mentioning a lot of things, and hats off to Josh Stanley and Realm of Caring. They're doing a lot of great work, and a lot of it's with children. And that was one of the things discussed in the panel was the aging brain and how we don't know how marijuana might affect development, and seemed like that's why they wanted to deny a lot of things, especially autism. It's a younger person disorder in general. And with all the seizure stuff going on, it's really hits home for me. I've had 5 seizures since I was refused, or since my bond condition was changed to not use medical marijuana. And with that being said, I'm really encouraging you to push forward with the gold standard. I have 2 doctors that will both be at every proceeding I go to from now on. They're both prepared to testify to everything that I would need and beyond. So, I really encourage that gold standard, and I encourage doctors to stand up. We heard a lot about black label writing of drugs, including marijuana, at the panel. And if you're a doctor, you know what that means. It's not a good thing. So I would definitely encourage the doctors that are doing this the right way to go ahead. And then last off, I really push for public opinion and for anyone involved or concerned in this to write Lara and communicate with Lara, because if no one else, they should be defending us patients that have done it the right way, got the card, and are being prosecuted for it. That's something in Rhode Island. I think their enforcement division has stood up for a few patients, and I would really, I paid money and did everything the right way, and I would really anticipate the respect from them that I think I deserve, and I would expect them to stand up for me as a citizen of Michigan and as a patient that did everything possible to follow the rules here.
You brought up something, we talk about all the time on the show, and we're going to go over a little bit here for a second as time's runs down, but one of the, especially in light of just having Dr. Crocker on and knowing that he's been one of the leaders in developing a standard of care, I can say without question that one of the reasons the challenges exist like they do is to be blamed on many of the physicians within and who've been participating as medical, or what I would call the handlers of the physicians. Because what has become to know, what's been now known as the standard by which we've accepted a traditional medical marijuana certification probably won't meet scrutiny if brought into court. I don't know that it's necessary. Again, the card is really but the point that I'm making is that you wouldn't want the doctor to come in anyway, so they're not backing it up, that they're not really participating. I mean, I think much the blame would be on the patients. I'm not blaming the patients, and the patients, I'm suggesting moving forward, need to be more responsible for their own charts, to be responsible for expecting certain types of behavior from their doctor. I think the days of trusting a physician to, especially in these instances when that interaction with that physician is going to be critical in how you're going to be defending yourself in court and may be a basis by which you can assert a medical marijuana defense. I think it has to be looked at completely differently. And I think on top of that is that some of these, the bad apples have ruined much of the bunch for a lot of people. And I can't say that, there's just been some really awful, terrible stories for whatever reasons. And it unfortunately has brought this tarnishment to the people that I am challenged by, the judges, the probation departments, the prosecutors. They think anyone can get a card because the last doctor that was here was didn't have a memory of, or just is terrible, or didn't show up, and it's just a mess, or
we've seen
in
court dates. We've also seen where the judge asked the patient who was your doctor, and they didn't know his name, they didn't even know what office he was in, and barely could recall the town that he got it in. And that goes to that as well, questioning. I don't think that it should be mandated to be a patient's responsibility. That's why there's a licensing board. But I think that any patient that takes this very seriously would have a good idea of who certified them, why they were certified, etc. One of the things that one of the panelists brought up in a panel, and it really hurt my feelings, I guess you could say, is he mentioned that there's many doctors that they all know of that have no scruples and write things willy-nilly. And I suggested when I had a few moments to speak, I suggested to the gentleman that ran the panel and is in charge of that they should be going after those doctors and yanking their license. If they know that there's doctors operating that way, you're putting the citizens at risk.
Through their inaction.
Right. If they know of it, I agree. That's more than those. But
again, wrap back around to the same department licensing physicians, patients, and caregivers.
And the point is, I'm not suggesting, Steve, that the thing, like to you or anyone else that's listening or will listen, I don't think that anything more than what any other interaction, maybe even less, should take place with a medical marijuana certification. I'm not suggesting, but I'm saying, you've seen some of the scrutiny that, the doctor interaction with the patient is being held to. The new amendments, the new amendments to what a bona fide relationship is, and now the 2-year period of time that your license is valid is a trap, right? Because 75% of the patients that we know, see the doctor once and come back at the end of the year, and they get recertified. Now it's going to be 2 years. That may not suffice in court. I don't think that it should be that way. I don't even think the doctor would need to be there or called in. The card should be enough. But if that doesn't work and you've got to rely upon the doctor, the patients need to be aware that they've got to be interactive with their physician throughout the 2 years. And if you don't have a physician that's willing to do that, you're not in the right place. If you're in a doctor's office, they're not prepared to get some kind of ongoing interaction with you, either by phone call where they're notating the chart, talk to the patient, discuss his cannabis use, said it's going good, he's taking less pills, sleeping good at night, getting a good night's sleep, whatever. Let's take, or even some documentation that's being sent into the doctor where they can record it and say that if called to testify between the time of the certification and the time that I've been here, I can actually look at my patient's medical situation. I didn't diagnose them, but I can at least tell you about what I know about how marijuana is either working for them or not working for them. I can stand here and say that it is. I would again today, like I did 6 months ago, confirm that marijuana may work for them, and I can even say that it is working for them. So I could see that this, or whatever. You know what I mean? Those kind of things will change the playing field. And there's too many doctors out there that are getting away with murder. If you're sitting in a waiting room where there's 30 people and you are seen by the doctor, all of you within 30 minutes, you've gone to the wrong place. Okay? It's disgusting because that doctor is a waste if they're going to be called to come to court. I'm just telling you. It's my experience. And further, Steve, you can maybe even help in this endeavor. We're going to start calling some of this stuff out. I've had too many negative experiences with physicians I think are taking advantage of the medical cannabis community. And the arguments can be made that their failure to show up and testify, their failure to participate with the lawyers, their failure to realize that the shitty job that they're doing is impacting the patient community and they shouldn't be taking their money, and not being prepared to stand in court and defend their certification. I think it's time to start calling some of them out because the patients are not aware. And this is an important bit of information, Steve, that needs to be sent forward so that people are more aware. The doctors that are taking the money of the community and not participating in defending the certification should not be getting money from the community. So
You're
the next couple of shows we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna get some doctors on that we feel are doing the right job and try to help them out and direct some of the patients that may be going to some of these rogue, selfish, not willing to come to court, mad at me because I'm calling them so they can come to court, and trying to extort money from the patients when they are a fact witness, not an expert. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise, because no one's going to be asking to have you qualified as an expert in medical cannabis. Anyway, I've said that.
Nice rant, dude.
End of the show, rant. Steve, you can have the final word.
I just want to agree with that and say that, I'm very proud of my doctors. I did subpoena them, and, they kind of laughed when they signed the subpoena that they received it because it was absolutely unneeded. But I wanted to do everything proper and by the book, and hats off to the doctors out there that are doing it right, backing their patients.
It is. It's
you got a subpoena them.
Yeah, you have. You have to do that because.
Good job.
It is courageous in like Dr. Crocker and Dr. Robert Townsend, who is a forerunner in the medical cannabis community, and we met with Dr. Kumar Singh today, and there's a lot of other doctors out there. I can't mention all of them, but I could list the ones that I would not have anybody go to. Well, maybe we're going to start doing that
in the future.
Yeah. Anyway, Steve, it's always a pleasure hearing from you. I appreciate the hard work you do, and I know all the patients who are in court or the caregivers are in court when they know that there's other members of the community that are in the pews watching. It makes the horrific process of going through the criminal justice system a little bit more palatable, and I know a lot of people appreciate all the hard work that you do, so thanks again.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too, thanks.
Talk to you soon. All right, then. So let's go around and wrap this up a little bit.
Don't forget to bring a towel. What? When you get out of the water, you need to dry off right away to avoid catching a cold. That's what Tally says. Don't forget to bring a towel.
We're gonna try to wrap it up in some way.
Okay. Thanks, Tally.
Someone jump in.
You want to get high? No.
Good night.
All right, let's do the wrap down.
Great show. Really enjoyed the conversation with Stuart Friedman. Really great stuff there.
I dreamt my back was up against the wall. You so
Rudy, are you here? My God, a lawyer that doesn't talk to you, have any cards on you? You better. Did you break the second rule? You didn't talk or bring any cards? Just kidding. I'm joking. I'm just kidding.
I thought it was a very interesting show tonight. I was interested to hear from the doctor about how that panel's going. And, just thinking about how illogical it is that the state licensed both the patient, caregiver, and the doctor, and we can't trust the card, says the prosecutor, and that judges are buying that argument is insane to me. But yeah, I thought it was a great show. It was too interesting for I was listening. I didn't need to waste any time with my talking this time.
You know, Dr. Crocker really, I mean, I felt like he's a polite man. He's very diplomatic. Polite doctor.
Perfect panel member.
Perfect panel member. But I mean, I got to tell you, to have to go through that again and then deal with more quagmire of a different makeup of persons.
He is serving. That's what I'm saying. Service.
Like I can't say that like that is because who else is going to do it, right? I mean, there should be others. I wonder what did we figure out?
Dave Brogren.
Dave Brogren, of course, Dave Brogren, and hats off to Dave Brogren. I didn't mean it that way, but I'm just saying, you know, same thing with Dave. Like Dave's got, you know, people have lives, you know, the volunteering and, you know, but it's courageous and meaningful, and it can't go. It cannot be understated. How does one get on the panel, Chad? You know?
I believe that.
Because I want to nominate Dewey. Dewey is a testimonial to the panel. We got to get some patience on this.
The applications back in the previous process, I believe, were to be sent to. I don't want to say the wrong person because people will send them, but I'll get that information and have it for next week.
All right. How about Rick with any final thoughts?
Well, this is the reason why you have Jamie as a producer instead of me, because Jamie brought you a guy who participated in oral arguments and in clinical relief today, and I would have brought somebody who clinically argued while giving me oral relief. So that's why we all have our special duties here.
I've been thinking of that all show.
You know it. I've been saving that sucker. I didn't figure it was appropriate to use during anybody else's comment.
I'm glad that we did it in the
in the after period. Right. Sure, I'm always good for the after period. But no, I thought it was a great show. I think that we're giving credit to some court cases that deserve it. We always do. But boy, clinical relief and the Court of Appeals, that's a 2010 case in 2013. If it goes back to a lower court, as Barb's case does, that could stretch on for another 12 months plus. At what price justice? At what distance do we stop saying that it's the expeditious execution? Those are questions beyond this particular issue, but are brought to our mind by this issue.
I don't want to go too far over, but there was a very significant event that we did not get a chance to talk about, and we could probably do a whole show on it, but let's at least document for a few minutes here as Pale Blue Eyes from 1969 plays in the background. I don't know if this is the right one for this. All right, wait.
Sounds pretty right.
Yeah, I think it is, right? Just to make sure. The disaster in Ypsilanti, can it be called anything else? Let's get it out there. J-Lo, what happened? What the hell is happening in Ypsilanti? Come on.
Well, there's a little change in the weather in Ypsilanti. We used to have a seemingly really good relationship with city officials and the community, and the community seems to still be pretty favorable, but some people who sit in positions of power seem to be kind of working against us through various means, and it's something that we have to deal with. There was just a DEA raid that was a result of a state warrant, and the city of Ypsilanti assisted with uniformed police officers and brought in a couple of city officials who were brought in to see if they found any violations of the license or ordinance. They found what looked like 2 roaches sitting in an ashtray, along with a bunch of other traditional cigarette butts, and a couple of loose buds, and a pack of paper that was all lined up. This was after the raid. And apparently the roaches were lying directly on top, and it was
Stop. I want to point out that you learned of this information because there was a hearing about this, right?
There was a hearing about a license revocation hearing. This is what it led to, and this is what I'm describing is the situation where the roaches and the buds were sitting out was the evidence that led to this license revocation hearing that I attended this morning, and Rick Thompson was there as well.
Would you report on that a little bit, please? What was the protocol?
Sounds civil.
Yeah, but they were ready.
Well, of course it is. There was no criminal charges. This is a hearing conducted by the city attorney and the city manager, and the city manager actually makes decisions. And I was there for the first part of it, and had to leave, and Rick Thompson stayed there for the entire time. So specifically describing this hearing, I think Rick Thompson could do that pretty concisely right now.
Let me just try to set up, make sure we're accurate on this, because it's
Sure.
There was a federal raid that had nothing to do with this. The place that was raided had a license from Ypsilanti. In conjunction with the raid while it was going on, one of the city officials was on site or learned of in some way that there was apparently burnt marijuana roaches or medical marijuana cigarettes that were in a tray of some kind, and it was based upon that the conclusion was made to bring a charge of a violation of the license, which would have been smoking on site, and thus a hearing ensued.
Right, and it's a little bit more insidious than that, because the DEA executed a state search warrant on the premises of the shop, which is the place we're talking about. Now, that's questionable itself, but sometime during the raid, the police officer representing the Ypsilanti Police Force took it upon himself to call the sergeant on duty, who then rousted two city officials and then sent them to the middle of an active crime scene where they walked in past people that were handcuffed, suspects handcuffed right there in the room, and then walked through, were led through this crime scene where they described they were taking ceiling panels down while they were there. They looked at the evidence of the ashtray, took photos, and then left. Never have I ever heard of city officials being called to look at an ashtray, while they're on company time, to drive someplace in the middle of a DEA raid with guns and cops all over the place looking for evidence. It just seems so contradictory. But the important thing is that today, the owners of the shop agreed to a 60-day suspension of their license, which means they'll close their doors for 60 days with the understanding that when they open back up, there's no additional penalty. Everything is exactly as it was before they started, and that it cannot be used as any basis in which to further damage their potential business license revocation. Business license renewal when it comes up. They've been there for 3 years, and during the hearing today, it was mentioned several times that there have been no problems, no concerns whatsoever with the place during that time.
I think the representation did a good job of pointing out how there was very weak circumstantial evidence at best, and they knew that, but they did tell them that we're going to suspend your license today, and if you appeal it, your license will remain suspended during the appealing process, and it'll be stretched out for a long time.
It was a threat they made to get them to take the 60 days.
Even though there was no real evidence with which to do this license revocation.
It was very interesting because originally they'd asked the two attorneys, the city attorney and their attorney, had agreed to 60-day suspension, and then the city manager said, nope, we'll have none of that, because that means it goes right back to the way it was when we started this whole thing, and that's just a slap on the wrist, and I can't have that.
And the hearing was based around this one issue of possibly consuming on site against license. Yet the city manager, who was to preside and make decisions, showed up with what he said were 14 violations as he understood them from reading the report. And some of them were based upon the medicine not being in a container, which does not exist in the ordinance or in the act, except for maybe in the driving issue. But other than that, it says in a secure environment. And that is not necessarily exempt from having medicine out on a table from time to time.
They certainly described a secure environment when they described the number of doors that had to be gotten through in order to get to the area, the break room where this was contained in. The city manager was so off today that he actually said that he thought that using the act of rolling the marijuana cigarettes, rolling the joint itself, was manufacturer of marijuana, because you're taking the raw product and then you're creating and packaging it. Therefore, that's manufacture, and that should be conducted exclusively at the growing centers, not at the distribution centers. The city planner and the city attorney sort of gently talked him down from that position, and it was only after he realized he was totally misinterpreting the ordinance that he became willing to let them have the 60-day suspension. It was bizarre, and the danger here is obviously that once they're successful penalizing one facility for absolutely no violations, they may go after another. Michael, it was a perfect example of why you have to have good representation of this thing, because as Jamie mentioned, the attorney that was there saved the day for his clients, really did.
What was the most effective thing that you recall? I mean, anything like, just say what, because he was kind of blindsided by the...
Most effective thing he said was when the city manager said, look, I've got 14 different violations here. He said, look, I've prepared to handle one item on this case, which is the one that I was served for, which is the issue of consumption on premises. If you would like to bring in any of these other issues, you have to have another session, or you have to let me break so I can re-prepare for my client. And the city attorney says, "You're absolutely right. We agreed to talk to
process.
this." So it was wonderful for him to take the wind out of the sails of this entire 14-item thing that he had and force him to confine it down for one, which was completely legitimately correct thing to do. So it was masterful. It was very good. And he couldn't have known that ahead of time. It's not something he could have prepared for. So he just helped with it on the fly. It was very nice.
Sounds like legal extortion to me.
There's a lot of ways in which cities can put pressure on people to accept situations that really they shouldn't if it's in an ideal world.
And of course, the wrap on this story, and it will continue on because there's work that we are doing in Ypsilanti still, and they just passed a stupid ordinance limiting the number of dispensaries. And that subject matter is not necessarily the issue. It's the fact that existing policy was working fine. They just decided to arbitrarily make this restriction in the midst of all this. But a similar raid took place in Walled Lake. The locals there chose not to participate because they, as in the case of Ypsilanti, give licenses and permit these places, and they've had no problems. So they decided not to help out this other unit of government to come in and disrupt what's been working there fine for a period of time.
Certainly didn't call two city officials out on the company time to come inspect an ashtray filled with some marijuana cigarettes, or some supposed marijuana cigarettes. The questioning revealed that naturally neither of the two city officials had touched them because they weren't allowed to possess marijuana, so they couldn't pick them up and examine them and give them any kind of a thorough look over. So the correct question was put to them that how do you know that wasn't just tobacco rolled in those things, and they admitted after questioning that they really couldn't verify that, even though in their story in their report they had said it was definitively marijuana.
And they never even discussed whether or not anybody, they did actually answer the question, did you see anybody consume that or smoke that? No. And they never got so far as to offer plausible reasons why that ashtray could have contained cigarette butts and roaches and still not have had somebody consume on premises. It never got that far, but they were not prepared with any real evidence. It was kind of a sham, and the fact there was any consequences is absurd.
And as Michael mentioned, too, all of this information that we're talking about here was public because it came out during the middle of the public hearing today. Nothing that we're discussing today is personal or private or as a result of any conversation from any of the party members. So this is all things that could appear in a Washtenaw newspaper or an Ann Arbor or Ypsilanti Courier. And probably should, actually. But in other words, Ypsilanti's undergone a bit of a transformation lately with, as Jamie mentioned, the failed emergency moratorium, which resulted in the ordinance, which received first reading and then the second reading and passage, and then their participation in this raid, and also similar aggressive statements made by council members. It's a place that we're going to need to pay some attention to, and it's also a place very ripe for a local initiative for 2014. The citizens always vote yes on anything containing marijuana in that city. It's supported.
There may be a popular referendum on this newly passed ordinance as well. There's some discussion about that.
All righty. I want to give a shout out to my dear friend Brian. My man Brian. In fact, everyone in the studio give a big yell to Brian.
Hey there, Brian.
Yo, Brian.
Yeah. He's still hanging in with us into the after hour. Could be. All right, we're going to wrap it up right there. Have a good night. We'll see everyone next week. Thanks for joining us.